For the most important news of the day, we've all hit 1,000 views on all platforms. And it is all because of all of you guys and all the love that we are getting. And hopefully we continue to get it. And let's hit 2,000 next month. And then let's hit 1 million in the month after.
Get straight into it. We're coming to you with some news from India. The Geological Survey of India found a lithium reserve of 5.9 million metric tons in the northern Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. This makes India's reserves the second largest on Earth, as much as Australia, China, Portugal, Zimbabwe, USA, and Argentina put together. So lithium, as we all know, or as we have all recently come to know, is very, very important for batteries. And all the lithium-ion batteries that are being used in electric vehicles, electric planes, and so on and so forth. And lithium has to be mined like every other metal out there, and it's not readily available in most places in the world. So this definitely does bode for a better future for our electric vehicles. It definitely makes for the prospect of getting cheaper electric vehicles in India in the future, because lithium does not have to be imported anymore and it just has to be mined from this particular area. However, this is all some ways into the future, as this deposit has just been found. For there to be mining taking place in this area, first the entire area has to be cleared, the villages will have to be relocated, equipment will have to be set up, the entire infrastructure for mining will have to be set up, because Jammu and Kashmir is a little disconnected from the rest of India currently in terms of getting resources out of there and things like that. So this is definitely something that we should see develop in the next few years. But for starters, this is very good news for India and obviously good news for the world.
So lithium, as you know it, has become such an important part of our lives. And even if, the first thing that comes to mind is electric cars, there's a lot of other things that are going on batteries. From your phones to your laptops to every device that you've ever used needs some kind of a battery inside it. In India, because there is an electricity problem as well, there are batteries within the houses. We are using lead acid batteries mostly, but they can be converted to lithium ion batteries, such as Tesla provides a power pack, which is literally a battery for your house. For industrial use, Tesla provides a power wall, which is like a bigger battery for your industry. So energy storage is becoming like such a core to it that lithium might just be, I don't like to use these words. These are used in football a lot. This is the next Messi. This is the next Neymar. So is lithium the next oil? Who knows how that goes?
That is making a bold prediction, my brother. I don't know if we want to get into such superlatives yet, but I think we're facing a storage crisis everywhere, be it energy, be it data, be it anything and everything. We're struggling to store things. Be it the clothes in my wardrobe.
Definitely. I don't know about your clothes. You should buy a little less. We can talk about consumption like we did in our last news episode. So for now, let's talk about the economic impact that it can have on a country. So there's this small nation called Nauru. It is an island nation. It is northeast of Australia. And this country found huge resources in the 1980s in its land. Now, this country allowed different nations to come into their country and exploit their resources, and they got paid very heavily for it, and they just consumed the money away, and right now they are etching to be one of the poorest in the world. On the other hand, an example of a nation that found resources and used it really well is Norway. So Norway accidentally found oil in its waters, and that oil right now has been used to form this thing called the Norwegian Sovereign National Fund. And what that fund does is it belongs to the people of Norway, and it invests in every company in the world, barring Norwegian countries and barring oil companies, which is very interesting to think of. An oil fund doesn't invest anything in oil, and it doesn't invest in any unethical companies, such as, Walmart became a case where they took Walmart out of the Norwegian Sovereign National Fund, and it was a big issue at the time. But that allowed the Norwegian people to know that at the time of their retirement or at the time when they're unemployed, they do not have to be worried about basic necessities or even luxurious necessities, because the country's fund can provide for it, which was provided by the country's resources. So it'll be an interesting follow to see if India does have these resources and if India does use these resources, what happens with the money and what kind of economic implications it can have for that country and how the country uses them.
So just to put things into perspective, Nauru, in terms of its area, ranks 194th in the list of all countries in the world. It is tiny. It is a blip which you will probably not even see on most maps. So it is very easy for us to completely ignore it as a country. I don't know how many of you would have heard of it before this podcast. Norway, on the other hand, is something that we've all heard of. It usually tops rankings in terms of happiness charts. It's usually there and thereabouts with Finland and Sweden and countries which are in and around Norway itself. I think when it comes to standards of living and the ideal life, Norway is usually in that conversation. So we all understand which way we want to go.
I think the primary thing that happens is that even if the world's dependence on oil goes down, even if the world's dependence on oil is finished, which is nowhere in sight right now, but if that does happen, Norway is even prepared for that, because Norway's future wealth and future wealth of that fund and of the people of Norway is not dependent on oil companies at all, which is a fascinating way to deal with oil money. You can go, again, with oil money, you can go numerous ways. We can have a complete episode on the whole Middle Eastern oil domination and what they did with their oil money. But it's just a fascinating thought as to where a country with its resources can go, economically speaking.
Speaking of lithium and EVs again, and I guess the European Union, the European Union has come out with this new law which says effective from 2035, they are planning to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. So imagine that in the next, 12 years, if you want to live in, or if you want to go to the EU and buy an ICE car, which is an internal combustion engine car, which uses petrol and diesel, you will not be able to. They are planning to go fully electric in terms of their new car sales. It's not saying you can't drive an internal combustion engine car, but just that you can't buy a new one.
So compared to the 2021 levels of CO2 emission, even by 2030, any new cars and vans that are sold need to cut down their CO2 print by 50%. And then by 2035, they need to cut it down by 100%. So there is a big boost towards electrification, maybe even hybridization initially for the first 5-6 years, till the time the infrastructure is developed for electric cars. But I think it's a huge step forward for the world, because even now there are like a lot more electric car sales in Europe as a whole.
Yeah, I think I was reading somewhere, again, Norway comes into the conversation, that 80% of the new cars sold in Norway were electric cars. That tells you where the EU is heading. And I think we're already in the age of hybridization. Most models of new cars now from most car manufacturers have a plug-in hybrid or a smart hybrid or some kind of hybrid.
You know, kudos to Elon Musk. I don't think much of Tesla as an investment because I think it is very hyped, but that is a very different topic of discussion. However, he has proved that electric cars are cool, electric cars are doable, and electric cars are for the many. Earlier, it was just a toy. Now it has become like a reality. And I think Tesla is at the forefront of creating that reality.
I think for the longest time, when you mentioned electric cars to people, Tesla was the only thing they could think about. I think Tesla and EV seemed to a lot of people as the same term for a long time. I know I was in that maybe a couple of years ago before I started actually reading about EVs. I thought the only EVs that existed on the market were Teslas for the longest time.
Talking about Teslas, let's lead into the next topic. So, a major issue with electrical vehicle ownership is the infrastructure of charging. And Tesla has dominated that infrastructure. And it is a main source of why people prefer Teslas, because you have a Tesla supercharger everywhere in the US. And they're building a new one, like on a weekly basis, you see a new Tesla supercharger coming into place.
And dude, these superchargers are so expensive. They cost about, I think, $250,000 per supercharger.
But you have to compare it to the price of what, a gas station setup charges. Like, how much does it take to set that up?
Oh, definitely. But this is one supercharger. So you think of a parking area like a charging bay, which has at least maybe 4 or 6 of these, and you multiply the cost, that comes to $1.5 million. It's not pocket change.
But they have been doing it, and very successfully. And if you're not driving a Tesla and you're driving any other EV, you have to depend on Electrify America network, right? And YouTube videos come out of people and their experiences. Most times chargers don't work, or they don't work at the capacity they claim that they're going to work. Of course, because it's a government project, and you know how government projects go, because it's always overinvestment, never optimization, the same as our discussion.
Back to our last news episode.
And the news episode, the Socratic debate, both of them have discussed how government spending might not be the ideal thing here, and this is a proof here.
I think you're going to see a lot of us debating these topics, speaking about government spending and things like that, because I think it bothers us personally when we see these things. And we're just like, it is so obvious. Why aren't people doing it? Obviously, it's not that simple. Politics, levels, this, that, and the other. This is just two people sitting and speculating in our living rooms.
But what the news topic is, we never got to the topic of the news. The news topic is that Tesla superchargers, which have been superior to other supercharger networks, are going to be open to other cars by 2024, which is a huge news because, that gives people a boost to go out and buy more EVs.
Dude, I was having a conversation with my dad yesterday about buying an EV in India. And he was like, oh, the charging network is not great. And, oh, we don't need it. And, oh, we don't use it. Because honestly, if you think about it, I drive maybe 25 kilometers a day, which would be about 10, 15 miles, which is nothing. So I was like, yeah, but imagine you're not using fuel. And he's like, no, but that's not the point of lithium ion. Why are you paying so much extra for it? And, it got to a point where I was like, there's no point having this discussion. We will cross that bridge when we have to. And if I am not driving as much, I can understand, not having an electrical vehicle and waiting for India to maybe catch up a little bit in terms of its charging network so that things are more accessible.
I think it is also very understandable. If there were no gas stations on the route, you would not be comfortable taking a gas car either. And just like that, there is a limitation, especially with India, because even the electric grid network is not at par with other countries as of now. It is getting there. It is increasing. And, maybe the country is headed in the right direction on that front. And let's see where it goes from there.
Dude, I was seeing this video on YouTube the other day. This guy called Matt Watson from Kahawao. He did an electric, sort of range test on 4 cars. And this is in the UK. And he passed a fair bunch of service stations and, charging stations, which were, as you said, with Electrify America, not charging up to their claimed kilowatt, not being operational, things like that.
So leading from government spending on electrifying America, the funniest thing happened. EU declares that by 2035, we are going to ban all, gasoline-powered vehicle sales. And Wyoming lawmakers have pushed to ban all electrical vehicles in Wyoming by 2035. Some craziness this is the government impact on things. We make gas cars. We have to save the industry of gas cars. Let's ban all the electrical vehicles when the whole world is moving towards something.
Yeah, this is when the biggest car makers in the US, like Dodge and things like that, are saying we're not going to make any more Chargers and Challengers, which are their signature V8 gas guzzling American muscle. They are now releasing electric versions of those, or they will be releasing EV versions of those. And there you have up north, redneck Wyoming country Americans saying that no, we want our gas guzzling Ford F-150 trucks. When the Ford F-150 Lightning EV, which has come out, is said to be one of the best electric trucks out there. It has a massive battery, it has massive storage, and the performance is supposed to be unreal.
It is their best truck ever in their own language. This is what happens when government intervenes into capitalism. Stay away, let the world take its course. Their statement is oil and gas production has been one of Wyoming's proud and valued industries and has created countless jobs in the region and contributed to the state's coffers throughout its history. Every time looking at the history, they are trying to make the future. It is the same argument as you want to create jobs, you want to dig a hole, give people spoons, and you're going to need 200 people to do it.
I think we referenced this in one of our earlier episodes as well. Oh yeah, Chat GPT, I think it was one of our first episodes.
I think it is a very powerful story, and the more it settles into people's brain, the better it is, because the job creation is not the end all be all of what needs to be achieved. It is efficiency. And the more humans achieve efficiency, the better their life will be.
And where on one end you have Norway, who is also an oil producer, not depending on oil. Here you have the opposite end of the spectrum, where a state that has based its income on oil and gas is trying to cling on to it. And as we've seen in the past, all those who try to cling on to the past eventually get left behind. So let's hope Wyoming comes to its senses and realizes it's time to jump on the EV bandwagon or get left behind.
Talking about oil dependence, why do we have an oil dependence when we can have so much renewable energy? The sun shines half of the day, the other half of the day, the wind is blowing, and yet we are still reliant on oil and we are still reliant on natural gas to produce electricity. A major reason for that is storage, as we discussed right in the beginning of this episode, right? And a big breakthrough has happened in storage. Researchers have successfully turned an abandoned oil well into a giant geothermal battery.
Now, what is a geothermal battery? Let's first explain that. So, a geothermal battery is a device that uses water tanks, the heat of the earth, and heat pumps, like you might find in a refrigerator, to maintain a reservoir of hot or cold water that can be used as energy. So this is because the temperature underground, also most of these geothermal batteries exist underground. They don't exist overground. They're not exposed to sun, wind, temperature changes, things like that. And the temperature underground is fairly constant. So whatever the heat is absorbed during the day, the soil holds the heat better than the air and releases this energy slowly at night. So the temperature underground remains stable pretty much all year round.
So here it says that the Illinois basin boasts the correct thermal conductivity for the deposition of water heated through excess renewable energy production from solar or wind. Minerals with high conductivity are sandwiched between insulative layers, creating the conditions for the water to retain its heat enough to generate electricity. Many of the same properties that make the subsurface rock formation ideal for oil and gas extraction also make it ideal for geothermal storage. So what they're doing is they're using external energy to heat up water, and then like a thermos works, the water is going to stay inside between the insulated layers of rock and stay warm. And then they'll be able to use that warmth in the future whenever you need to use energy out of it. So as batteries work, energy goes in, energy gets stored, and then whenever we need it, energy goes out. Just like that here, energy goes in to heat the water, and energy is stored as, thermally water retains its heat. And then whenever we need it, we convert it to electric energy.
So the study also says that the average net cost of electricity generation is $0.138 per kilowatt hour, making the system very economically viable and profitable.
Now it is a huge win-win situation. Plus the thermal efficiency of the whole model is said to be at 82%, which is very high for context. And let's see where it goes. It's another new kind of thing that we are venturing into. The research was just conducted on Feb 13th. They launched the result, which is this week. That's why news of the week. But there are so many abandoned oil wells in the country and all over the globe. maybe all of them can be converted to something like this, or something like mechanical batteries, which we can discuss in a future episode.
Definitely. I think oil being a non-renewable resource, what do you do once that oil runs out? That oil well has been constructed, it exists. So may as well make some use of it. And yeah, this is again an experiment that was conducted. This is the first news of success. So there's definitely going to be more iterations, more advancements, more developments. So this is again something to keep following. And yeah, we will keep you up to date with it. We will also follow it and see as and how there's stuff that comes out on this topic.
So let's go into some rapid fire news sessions where we can, throw out some headlines that maybe you guys can go and look further into them. So one of them that I have is that research conducted by our MIT University has found out how to make hydrogen straight from seawater, and no desalination of the water is required. Producing hydrogen by itself is very expensive, and hydrogen as a fuel is best alternative fuel for the current aircrafts. And, it might help for aircrafts to go green faster.
I'm sure all of you have heard of compressed hydrogen being used in cars and airplanes and things like that as alternatives for petrol. So here's hoping that the process of getting that hydrogen so that it can be used as a fuel becomes easier, cheaper, and greener. Moving on, how many of you have had discussions with your friends about how beer is supposed to be poured? I know there are people who will pour it extremely carefully so that there is not even a thin layer of foam that is created. I know people who pour it in such a way that there is more foam in the glass than beer. So the American Institute of Physics has released some research as to what constitutes the perfect pour. Essentially, what this group discovered is that pouring beer is too much uncertainty, and they're going to remove the process of pouring itself by creating bottom-up pouring. I think you might have seen this at one of these bars and all, where they put a glass on top of on a stand and they press it down and like beer fills up from the bottom. So this company has created a bottom-up pourer where the beer's foam phase slowly decayed, taking approximately 25 times longer to fully fizzle out than it took to form. And they say this, through experiment, is going to create the perfect pour every single time. So there is no uncertainty whatsoever. So here's to enjoying your perfect glass of beer.
There's no fighting with your family about how bad you poured or how good you poured. You just place your glass there and you get the perfect pour every time with no consequences.
Making us humans lazier again.
I love it. On a good news for some kids out there, there has been conclusive research that video game playing causes no harm to your young children's cognitive abilities, study finds. And there was an old fear that there are a lot of bad effects of excess video game playing. Please, parents, stopping your kids from playing video games. Push them into it. There have been numerous studies which are, helping you find that there is no meaningful effect, there is no harm to the child. In fact, children do get better at decision-making skills and leadership skills when they take up these leadership roles, trying to kill the other team. And even though it feels excessive that they are going on these violent journeys by themselves in GTA, trying to throw women off of their cars and trying to run over men with their fancy Ferraris, it's helping them grow. So, who knows where the future lies.
I think video games definitely help in decision making, and there have been instances of people getting jobs after playing video games. I think there is this manager of this football club called Reem, who is a 30-year-old manager who's been selected purely based on his abilities of playing Football Manager. He doesn't have his coaching badges yet, so Reem pay a fine of 25,000 euros every game he manages. 25 or 22,000, I'm not sure of the exact amount. But they pay a hefty fine for every game he manages, and they're doing really well. And he's being touted as the new hot young thing. He's a 30-year-old guy. So definitely, I guess, when you get to that point and you're playing video games to that level, there is a lot more to be had. But even casually, I think it's a great bonding between friends. And obviously, one should not excessively do it, because it affects your other activities, but there has to be a balance.
Bro, you're talking about people getting jobs based on video games. Playing video games is a job by itself. There's a whole YouTube segment where people are just sitting with face cams and playing games, and they're making bare amount of money. Like, they're making a lot of money. My nephews all day, all night watch YouTube gamers playing some random games which I have never even seen of. I used to watch them, and they're doing very well. There's a whole group called the Sidemen, which have just built themselves on video games. There's this guy called KSI. He became a boxer after video game, and this Jake Paul fellow again, he became a full-on fighter, and they're doing very well in life. Go for it.
Yeah, man, I think it's really taken over young people, or I think these YouTubers, video gamers have now taken over from movie stars, film stars, actors, sports people and all, and have become more famous, equally as famous, one of those things, especially amongst kids today.
So in some interesting news,
I like how you call it interesting.
coffee trumps economic crisis as Tim Hortons opens in Pakistan. So Pakistanis are queuing for hours to grab Canadian coffee from the chain Tim Hortons. In a country that asked International Monetary Fund bailout just last month,
Oh, they're still desperate.
they are still desperate. They have broken the opening day sales of any Tim Hortons ever.
Tim Hortons, aka the McDonald's of Canada.
Tim Hortons, aka every corner street everywhere in Canada. It is craziness how many Tim Hortons there are.
Aka McDonald's of Canada.
And it is getting such crazy love in places like India and in places like Pakistan. Pakistan has no money. Why are they going out and breaking records for coffee?
The Pakistani government has no money, my friend. It's not Pakistan.
And the clearer that gets, the better picture we get of reality of the world. Ahmed Javed, a medical student who used to go to Tim Hortons while he was living in Canada, said higher prices don't really matter for the class of people coming here.
So it's gone from a everyday grab a coffee on your way to work thing in Canada to a high class thing in Pakistan.
I mean, what can you talk about? Talking about consumption is always a weird topic. I just found the news very funny.
Oh, dude, it's hilarious. I can completely imagine that happening though. I remember, I think it was Zara or Starbucks or one of these chains when it first opened in India also. There were lines around the block for it.
Pakistan has an inflation of 27% year on year, and the government has enough foreign reserves to pay for just over 3 weeks of import. And in that situation, Tim Hortons is selling out like crazy, and you just gotta love the irony.
Well, you know the old saying, right? If you want something to be popular in the East, just say it's from the West and people will flock to it.
That's a nice one.
On a sadder note, there was a train going through East Palestine, Ohio, carrying some toxic chemicals which derailed and caught fire, leading to a lot of these chemicals coming out into the air and the water around the area. That has led to massive environmental impacts around East Palestine. So many that people are comparing it to Chernobyl and the Bhopal gas tragedy in India. This is something that happened 2 weeks ago, but residents have just moved back and they are still seeing effects of it in the air, in the water. Kids are complaining of headaches. There are pets passing away. There are fish in the nearby river which have passed away by the thousands. So this is one environmental disaster which is taking place in the US and it continues to develop. So let's hope things get better quickly. Speaking on a sadder note, the Turkey-Syria earthquake rescue effort continues. There's a report of more than 38,000 people dying in Turkey and 5,800 in Syria. So here's hoping that things can get better quickly, more aid can reach these countries, and yeah, it's one of the worst disasters that has happened in these areas for a long, long time and in the world. So we're adding a link to how you can donate to the various crises that we have mentioned. Unfortunately, that is all that we can provide in terms of support. But our thoughts and prayers are with everybody going through this crisis, and we hope things take a turn for the brighter in the very, very, very near future. With that, we will sign off. Thank you for listening to us, and we will see you again soon.